In this video, I am going to look at a game I played a couple of Saturdays ago in a county match against Middlesex. The match was played at the Middlesex home venue in North London. I was on board 4. I had the black pieces and was up against Tiruchirapalli Venkataramanan, a FIDE master rated about 250 points higher than me. My opponent started with e4 and after e5, knight c3, knight f6, f4 we had a line of the Vienna game. I responded with the recommended d5, f takes e5, knight takes e4, and now my opponent chose queen f3, a line that was once rare but is now pretty popular, at least as far as lines of the Vienna go. Possibly my opponent thought I would be unfamiliar with the line, but I had already met it twice over the board, in addition to having read about it. I responded with knight c6. The point is that white cannot grab the pawn with knight takes e4 because of knight d4 when he finds himself in real difficulties. Instead, my opponent chose the main move bishop b5, which renews the threat of knight takes e4 by stopping knight d4 in response. I now went for a forcing line with knight takes c3, d takes c3, queen h4 check, g3, queen e4 check, queen takes e4, d takes e4. When we have a complex endgame with an unusual pawn structure. Both e-pawns are weak, while white has a crippled queenside majority. White decided to reduce the pressure on his e-pawn and weaken black's pawn structure with bishop takes c6 check, b takes c6, but this gives black the bishop pair in return. After bishop e3, black looked to exploit white's weakness on g3 with h5. Following castles long, now the disruptive bishop g4 was worth considering, but black chose h4, which was fine. But after g takes h4, he was intending to play rook takes h4. But then realised that bishop g5 seems to just win the exchange because of the dual threats of rook d8 mate and bishop takes h4, and so rejected the move. However, black can play bishop e7, bishop takes h4, bishop takes h4, when the bishops and the pawn on e4 are very strong. This gives black ample compensation for the exchange. But black did not consider that possibility and so chose bishop e7, intending to play rook takes h4 on the next move. Now, bishop g5 looks natural, but is met strongly by f6, e takes f6, g takes f6, bishop e3, bishop g4, when black's bishop pair and lead in development, combined with his passed e-pawn, will cause white great difficulties. Knight e2 looks most sensible, although after rook takes h4, black is obviously doing fine. Instead, white chose rook d2, but the rook looks poorly placed on this square. White's idea was perhaps to provide some lateral protection to the h-pawn, but the rook is rather passive now. Play went rook takes h4, knight e2. Now, g6 looks best, protecting the f5 square and anticipating pressure down the g-file. It is sensible to keep the rook on h4, where it covers the e-pawn for the moment. However, black played rook h3, hoping to exploit the position of the bishop on e3. But this can be met by the simple knight g3. Play went bishop e6, rook g1, g6. Black anticipates white attacking down the g-file and deprives the white knight of the f5 square. b3. White covers the c4 square to prevent bishop c4 and prepares c4. a6. Black frees the rook on a8 from the defence of the a pawn. Rook on g to g2. White frees the rook on d2 from covering the h pawn. Rook d8. Black judged that this would be a favourable exchange, as the rook was inactive on a8, while the rook on d2 was a useful defensive piece. Rook takes d8 check. King takes d8. King d2. White defended the bishop on e3, perhaps hoping to take the pawn on e4, although he needed to prepare that further. Now black could have brought up his king with king d7, as the pawn is immune from capture at the moment. Now knight takes e4 is met by bishop d5, rook g4, rook takes h2 check, regaining the pawn with an overwhelming position. Black has a protected passed pawn on the king side, while white's queenside majority is crippled. Instead, c4 prepares to take on e4 by stopping bishop d5, but bishop f5 defends the pawn easily enough. Now, knight takes f5, g takes f5 makes things worse, as the white e-pawn is weak while black has a dangerous pair of connected passed pawns. Instead, knight e2 is more sensible, although after bishop b4 check, provoking a weakening, c3, bishop f8, threatening bishop g7, followed by taking the e-pawn, it is not obvious what white should do. Instead, black decided to defend the e-pawn at once with rook h4. Now, white played c4, perhaps hoping to penetrate the queenside with his king, or to gain further space with c5. Black decided to preempt all such ideas with c5. White looked to improve the position of his knight with knight e2, and black put pressure on the white e-pawn with rook h5. Following bishop f4, defending the e5 pawn and perhaps threatening to go after the e4 pawn, black was faced with a big decision as to how to improve his position. Now, bishop f5 looks like a sensible way to proceed. Now, knight g3 is met by rook h3, as knight takes f5, g takes f5, leaves black with a powerful pair of connected passed pawns. White cannot successfully go after the e4 pawn with king e3, king d7, knight g3, because of rook h3, and white is all tied up. Instead, black was tempted into the aggressive but weakening g5. Play went bishop g3, bishop g4. Black wanted to defend the e-pawn with bishop f3. King e3, bishop f3, rook g1, c6. Black looked to cover the d5 square against a possible knight incursion. Rook d1 check, king e8, rook d2, g4. This is a double-edged decision. On the positive side, black is now able to bring his bishop to g5, and the bishop on f3 is more strongly supported. On the negative side, white now has the f4 square for his pieces. Bishop f4, rook h3, knight g3. I now had 6 minutes left on the clock. Here I considered various moves, but was unable to settle on anything good. Now, bishop h1 was the best try, keeping e4 defended but pinning the knight, when it is not clear how white will make progress. Instead I went for bishop f8, which is very poor. White now had a winning position, which he did not let slip. Knight takes e4. I totally overlooked this move. Now, bishop h1 check could be met with knight g3, and black has nothing for the pawn. Instead, he went for bishop takes e4 check, king takes e4, bishop h6, deciding that his best chance lay in a rook endgame. Play went bishop takes h6, rook takes h6, king f4, king e7. Black couldn't defend his g-pawn, so he went after his opponent's e-pawn. King takes g4, rook g6 check, king f3, rook g1, rook d6, rook e1. Black now wins the e-pawn, but unfortunately white picks up his queenside pawns in return. Rook takes c6, rook takes e5, rook takes a6, rook h5, rook a5, rook takes h2, rook takes c5, rook takes c2. This is of course totally lost for black, but he went on, hoping for something to turn up. Rook e5 check, king d6, rook e2, rook c3 check, king e4, rook h3, b4, rook h4 check, king d3, f5, a4, f4, a5, f3, rook f2, rook f4. Black forces white to do some calculation. White can win the f-pawn by bringing his king across, but then black can go after white's queenside pawns. a6. White correctly decides to advance his queenside pawns instead. King c6, b5 check, king c5, a7, rook f8. White has one small trap to avoid. a8 equals queen, rook takes a8, rook takes f3, rook a3 check, which is drawn. Instead, he played the correct rook a2, and after king b6, a8 equals queen, black resigned just before losing on time, as the position is hopeless for him.